You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com. I look a little different on the YouTube video if you decide to check out the video version of this show, which by the way, last week was a mess, or last episode was a mess because of a recording issue on Ed's end. So there's just a picture of Ed that pops up when I'm talking to him. But hopefully it's working today. We're still working out the kinks.
I was trying to get him to animate me like a Canadian from South Park, just to have the top of my head bobble around. But Chris said he couldn't pull that off, so I don't know.
As I pull up the stool here to the bar, and I do look a little different today because I went to the eye doctor, and so I have contacts in because I was getting new contacts, and I didn't put a hat on before I came down here, so my hair's combed. So this is what the ladies see when they swipe right on the app. This is what they get.
Nudie After Dark. Right. This is what they get.
They get the blue eyes and proof that at 47 years old I still have hair. Like I gotta bust out all. Ladies, I own my own home. I have the kids. I've got blue eyes, and I've still got hair on my head at 47. Like you gotta get the things in there that they're checking off, the boxes. You got to be able to show it off on that first date. So yeah.
I'm no argument here. I wouldn't know. I'm still married, so I.
Oh man. Anyway, let's talk about the White Sox. That's what the show's about. But let's talk about what they've done.
Novel idea.
Over the last couple of days here, there's been a lot of roster moves. I'm personally a little annoyed. I would have liked to have seen them give Kyle Teel a real chance to make the team. Like we talked about this a little bit on the last episode. The idea that, well, we've got these guys and we've got to control their service time. So we're going to hold them down until we're ready for everybody to be part of the next run. And I just think that's a terrible way to run a team, because when you fill a roster, when it's finally time to hit the go button, if everybody's a rookie, if everybody's got inexperience, it doesn't work. Some of these guys can arrive a year before another guy. Kyle Teel has played so well in spring. If he's ready, let him play. And now Major League Baseball gives you an incentive. What if he goes out there and he has a Rookie of the Year type season at catcher? And you get a draft pick out of the whole thing. Like you get incentives now for not holding these guys back. He's on fire in the spring. And so like I look, I'm sure they have a good argument for it. But you sent Kyle Teel and Edgar Quero down. That's what happens when you try to say Edgar Quero and Kyle Teel at the same time. You come up with Keel.
Yeah.
They become Keel. They form like Voltron into Keel.
Which would be an amazing catcher, by the way. Talk about Rookie of the Year. Just write him in right now.
Oh, God, I got Keel's baseball card. It's amazing. It's going to be worth a ton one day. But Kyle Teel...
Why is he naked on it?
Kyle Teel and Edgar Quero both go down and get reassigned to minor league camp. And for it to happen on, the 17th? It was released on St. Patrick's Day. So most of us weren't paying attention because we were drinking. But it gets put out there that they're both sent to minor league camp. And for them to be sent on this date with like a bunch of other guys, it just feels like they were never in the plans. They were never going to get a legit shot. It didn't matter what they did at the plate. That's how it feels. And I kind of feel like Teel did enough that he should have been allowed to stick around a little bit longer. He did enough that he maybe deserves an opportunity to break camp with the team. And I really believe that Quero is going to get a chance based upon the way that he was talking in interviews in the offseason. Like we've said it before, he sounds like the kind of guy who's been told, you're making this team. You're going to be a part of things. Now, I feel like we're going to see one, if not both of them, before the season is over. And we talked last episode about how Corey Lee has to be a little nervous about this because they're not going to keep three catchers. And the point was made by several listeners who reached out in the comments on either YouTube or for any of the other shows, or, sent us a message through soxinthebasement.com. One of these guys can be moved to another position. Yes, that's true. You may see all three of them on the major league roster at some point. But I don't know. There was a part of me that really thought it would have been a great story, the way that Kyle Teel was playing, if he made it to the major leagues and was playing on a regular basis for this team. And I worry that we're doing the same thing we did with the last rebuild, which you can put in quotes in a lot of ways, with this rebuild, which you could put in quotes in a lot of ways. The idea that we're not going to have these guys that are going to be part of the next core come up until they all come up together. And that didn't work last time because you just had a bunch of rookies that didn't know how to be Major League Baseball players all at once. And they didn't all hit at the same time, and it stumbled and it fell flat on its face, Ed.
Well, and the one opposite of that is that they're not rushing guys up like Andrew Vaughn was not ready, even though they declared him ready. Kyle Teel, I will agree with you, looked ready. His final spring stats with the club are going to be 294 average with a 1.135 OPS, right? 4 walks, 4 strikeouts, so that's pretty good. Just, looked good at and behind the plate. Edgar Quero, I just don't think did enough to make the team. He was 250 with a 544 OPS, isn't going to do anything.
Yeah, no, anybody. not him.
Yeah,
but Kyle Teel.
But Teel, and granted, Corey Lee's having a really great spring too, but you still, the idea of competition, and let's give Kyle Teel every opportunity to hang with the major league club for as long as possible. You get to the end of spring training and you decide, you know what, sending Corey Lee back down doesn't do anything for Corey Lee. Sending Matt Thies packing doesn't really, move the needle for the team because we're not going to split time between Lee and Teel evenly. We want Kyle Teel to play every day in Charlotte. That makes some semblance of sense too, if you want to go that route. But
here's
to
the
send
thing.
him down, like you said, to send him down now and sit there and say, look, you were just really never in the plans. You're a minor leaguer. You're a minor league guy. Thanks for showing up to spring training. Now go down there and figure some stuff out. Teal's not getting moved off a catcher. He's too good back there. Quero, maybe Edgar Quero is the guy that of the three of them goes down now just to sit there and say, let's learn a new position and see what we can do and just focus on your hitting and forget about the defense because we got that covered for a long time to come, it looks like.
Well, here's the thing. I look at this catching situation and some of the stuff you just brought up, and I wonder if the reasoning behind not giving Teel an opportunity, like maybe there was a discussion at some point. Maybe at some point they start talking and they go, well, what about this kid? He's hitting the cover off the ball. His defense is good enough. Why don't we bring him with Corey Lee? And you don't know if with the young pitching, and they did go out and get, Thies is a guy that was brought in really for the staff. And the idea may be, we want to start the season with him on the roster, and we're not moving Corey Lee out of the way yet because we think that he's at least at minimum a really good backup catcher who's having a really nice spring, so you want to give him opportunities. You bring Teel, you got to give him at least half the at-bats, if not more, because he's the future. He's the big name, right? So you're going to cut into any more development at the major league level with Corey Lee, and now those two guys are going to deal with this young staff and some of the young pitchers that they want to bring along to another level. So the idea may be, look, he's going to get here, but let's start the season off with what the original plan is, because Thies didn't do enough to say he shouldn't be there, and Lee's hitting the ball really well, so that's why we're not going to rush with Teel. But I do like what you're saying there about Quero. I think Teel has done enough that I wouldn't be surprised he goes to AAA. And Quero's in AAA as well, but Quero's a DH and he's getting time in the outfield or standing at first base. Because here's the other thing. Andrew Vaughn did nothing to make this team. And as I watch guys that are getting peeled off of the roster, if you look at his stats, there's I'm just going to bring up where they're at currently in spring, okay? And for all the people who are like, but it's Andrew Vaughn. But it's Andrew Vaughn. He's not one of these guys. Andrew Vaughn, over a large sample size now, has never been anything other than a replacement level player. That's what he is. If they wouldn't have given him arbitration, it wouldn't have been a shock to me. In fact, I was surprised they wanted to give him $6 million for all the penny pinching they're doing to keep him on the team. And we've talked about the reasons why they may have kept him. Big clubhouse presence. They feel like he's got a little leadership qualities, didn't put his head down when everybody else kind of did at the end of the year. Okay, they still want to see if there's something they can unlock because of his draft status, all those different things. But if you look at who he sits with, if I just sort the stats of this team in spring by OPS, which is a pretty simple way to kind of sort it, right? It's going to take into account your on-base percentage and your slugging, which, by the way, He's slugging worse than his on-base percentage. So everything's weak right now that he's hitting. Andrew Vaughn is surrounded by Andre Lipschitz was just reassigned. Jacob Amaya, who should not make this team. Colson Montgomery is very close to him. He's only 2 spots away from him on that list. He was reassigned to minor league camp, or actually sent to the minors because I think he's on the 40-man roster. Edgar Quero is very close to him statistically. Mike Tauchman, who a lot of people are wondering, is he going to actually make the team with all the different outfield options and how he's playing? I think he still does. George Wolkow, who everybody talks about, he's the next Aaron Judge. We just have to wait 5 years for it. All these guys hitting right around what Andrew Vaughn is hitting. He didn't do anything this spring. All these guys aren't making the team. And Andrew's going to be standing at first base. So Edgar Quero working out at first, probably a good idea. And so I think that what you're looking at possibly here now, what Teel might have done is at least shown them, hey, he's good at defense and now the bat is playing really well. This kid's close. We see what Corey Lee is doing. We're not going to say Quero's never going to be a catcher. I'm sure he gets in there and catches 1 or 2 games during the week, right? I mean, like you're going to get Teel out from behind the plate a few times in AAA so you don't wear him out. And you're going to have Quero go behind the plate. But maybe you start moving him over the first base because, again, anybody smart who's not looking through the rose-colored glasses of this guy came from our organization, so we believe in him, has to look at Andrew Vaughn and say, I don't know if there's a long-term future for him in Chicago. If he doesn't come out and do something to prove me wrong, like how Miguel Vargas has proven me wrong so many times over the last week and a half when I was like, he's done and they shouldn't even give him a chance. He's going to make the team. And now I'm hopeful that we're going to get what they hope they're going to get out of Miguel Vargas. Andrew Vaughn's got to do the same thing. And I don't know if it's going to happen yet, Ed. For those out there who are looking for some home medical equipment, trying to keep mom and dad, grandma and grandpa out of assisted living, switch to a new age of life with Hyatt Home Medical Equipment. Make it so they can get around on their own and live independently with stair lifts, ramps, grab bars, lift chairs, and even bathroom remodeling. Hyatt works with your insurance and has 0% financing for qualified individuals. If you use a CPAP machine and you're unhappy with your vendor, switch now, get supplies directly mailed to you, and test them out in their new showroom. They also have the latest and greatest in continuous glucose monitors. Learn all about Hyatt Home Medical Equipment at hhme.com. Possibly first base for Quero in the minors? I think that's the right move.
Oh, I would think so. I would assume that if you're looking at Corey Lee as a guy that is going to be now a veteran backstop, right? He's got a full year in the majors pretty much under his belt.
And had no trouble yelling about the manager in the press. So yeah, total veteran.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, Pedro? He doesn't know what he's doing.
And you need some of that leadership quality out of your catcher too. He can be an outspoken guy, and that's great. So I'm looking at this from the standpoint of if Edgar Quero's defense was the one question that was holding him back from claiming Corey Lee's job, right? If Edgar Quero's defense was really good, would they have grabbed Kyle Teel in the deal with the Red Sox, or would they have pushed harder for Christian Campbell or pushed harder for Roman Anthony or one of the other prospects? And again, I don't know that the Red Sox give those two guys up, but Teel was definitely in their plans. He was their catcher of the future. So I think there's probably been some unspoken coming into the spring. Hey, Edgar Quero, we really like this kid's bat. We're not happy with where the defense is. We know we got Corey Lee, whose defense is very good. We know that we can get a veteran in here who understands how to handle the staff. There's plenty of those guys around. It happens to be Matt Thies. And Kyle Teel looks like the real deal as far as starting catcher going forward. I would say the unspoken word is, Edgar Quero, come in, show us something in spring, tell us where you're at by how you play, and then let's make a determination. It's not easy to switch positions necessarily, but first base is probably the one that makes the great deal of sense for him, only because it's, you're not going to ask the guy necessarily to go down the hot corner. Although if he shows some sort of aptitude towards that and Miguel Vargas ends up flopping, you don't have another plan there. So that's an avenue.
It's normally a corner outfield spot or first base for catchers when they move into a different
I feel
spot.
Like that's what happens, though. It's just, left field also seems like a place that he could end up, because if you don't know how to play defense in the outfield, you go to left field.
Right. They put Andrew Vaughn there.
They put Andrew Benintendi there. So
that's true. The Andrew Benintendi stand out there and butchers left field.
Now
every
Edgar
day.
Quero's going to have to change his name to Andrew, though. So he's going to have to be Andrew Quero from now on. But that's okay.
That's all we put in left field are Andrews.
Yes.
Talking about outfielders, this is something I brought up on this show before, the idea that you bring in veterans that are a baseline, that are at least replacement level, that are professional baseball players that you know what they can bring. And then you tell the young guys, be better than that, and we would happily give you the job. You don't just say, young guy, you get the job. No. Be better than that guy, and you can get the job. And they brought in some veteran outfielders. And there were guys who had every opportunity this spring to try to get the job, and they did not get it done. Zach DeLoach, who early on in spring training, Fangraphs had him projected to make the team, did not make the team. He has been reassigned to minor league camp. Corey Jokes, who got a good look after they acquired him last year, had a few moments. He was intriguing for a little bit of time in the middle of that garbage that we were watching. Corey Jokes gets DFA'd, still makes it through waivers, comes as a non-roster invitee, and he is back reassigned to minor league camp. And Dominic Fletcher, a kid who I thought had a ton of talent and really should have come back this offseason and won a job on this team. He has been optioned to AAA Charlotte. So they had young guys that had opportunities, didn't take the opportunity. Meanwhile, Oscar Colas still hanging in there. Yeah. And that's the guy, I'd like to see him make this team. And I think they still are trying to figure out what he is. It's been a fluctuating performance from him throughout spring training. It'd be interesting if he turns it on the next week. Not only does he make the team, but is he standing out in right field opening day?
Well, and to your point, 267 with a 713 OPS, it's not pretty. He's got 7 Ks to 1 walk, which is in keeping kind of with how his profile goes. A little more swing and miss in his game than I think the White Sox would like. No home runs. That's the only thing that bothers me right now about Oscar Colas is just hasn't put the ball out of the ballpark, and that's his calling card, his power. And the 2 doubles are nice, but I think he'll get more opportunity though coming this week because they've thinned the outfield herd, and you kind of have a better feeling for an older veteran like Mike Tauchman who's not hitting very well. That when the regular season starts, you sort of figure he'll settle into what he is normally. And with Oscar Colas, though, we still don't know. So I bet he gets a lot of run at the end of spring training here just to prove it. But you're right. I think if he turns it on and he gets hot at the end of spring training, I think he hits. And I think there's a very real possibility that you could find him out there on opening day in some capacity, whether he's starting as a DH or he's starting out there in the outfield.
Or possibly at first base. Remember, they've considered moving in the first base. Yeah,
and first base isn't out of the realm of possibility either. Although I feel like Andrew Vaughn's got that locked down because he still has those naked pictures of Jerry or whatever.
He's got pictures of somebody.
He really does.
He's got pictures of somebody. Brandon Drury's making the team.
Brandon Drury should make the team.
So what is he then? Is he the starting second baseman? I've seen some projections that he's the DH, and I've seen some projections that he's starting at second base. He also plays first base, but again, you talked about it, the naked pictures that Andrew Vaughn must have of somebody. So Brandon Drury, maybe the second baseman, Josh Rojas, would they really, Fangraphs is trying to say that they believe that Rojas, even though with the very little experience he has at shortstop, becomes the shortstop here. Sosa is a guy that stands at second base. Drury's the DH, and Vargas is at third. I think they're dead wrong with their projections. That's out of town, dead wrong is what that is. Because there are times their projections for depth charts are way off. And I would think that Rojas would have been the guy who would have put at third if Vargas wasn't hitting so well. Now I think Vargas stands at third. Rojas probably could end up at second, but he's not hitting super great. So maybe Drury's the second baseman, and then you decide between whether or not you want Sosa or Rojas there a little at short, and the other one's the DH. It's interesting. I feel like all those names have a great chance of making the team and being in the mix every day to make the lineup and be out there on the field. That seems to be it. And then you got surprise guys like Tristan Gray, who still played pretty well out there. And who else they got out there? Their extra outfielder is that kid that was with the Orioles for a while. Why can't I remember his name? Nick Maton, who also could play some in. He can also play some infield, and he's been hitting really well. He's hitting .333 with an 11.23 OPS through 27 at bats in 15 games. So it's interesting here. Like that's the one thing, Ed, that has stood out to me about this spring. And we asked whether or not it was going to be this way. These journeymen, these everyday baseball players, these guys that they at least know what they are, they're going to end up with the jobs because the young guys are not taking the jobs. A lot of those names there are guys that if things went well for the White Sox, somebody else took that job instead of them.
Yeah, well, Chase Meidroth, for example, is a guy that is still hanging around. He's got a .306 on base percentage, which is great, but he's hitting 107. And the OPS is .449. He hasn't done anything at the plate, really, to suggest that he's major league ready. And so you still have a question about shortstop, I think. Brooks Baldwin having a decent spring could be a guy there. But I think one of the things that I would wonder if they would toy around with, because Miguel Vargas is hitting so well, is and his defense is not spectacular. I would wonder with the emergence of Brandon Drury and knowing Josh Rojas is a good third baseman, I would wonder if Miguel Vargas, if they just sit there and say, you know what, Miguel, you're this team's DH. Just keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
put the bat on the ball and hit.
Listen, that makes an awful lot of sense, except you have to take into account that the White Sox, somewhere along the line, it feels like, and we heard this at the beginning of camp, he's the third baseman of the future. I mean, we yelled about it enough on this show. Like, what did he do to prove himself to be the third baseman of the future to this point? But that seems to be the guy that, at least on their whiteboard in some office somewhere, they believe is your third baseman of the future. They don't really have a plan after him, at least in their own minds, right? Like, I'm sure somebody can go find somebody else that they're like, oh, well, maybe Brian Ramos comes along and becomes. Miguel Vargas seems to be that. Like, of course, because. And people, there's going to be certain names that all year long you're going to hear me yell and complain about on this show. Andrew Vaughn is going to be one of them. Okay, Miguel Vargas has been one of them. If Miguel Vargas shows up for the first 30 days in the majors and goes back to being the Miguel Vargas that I thought he was a couple weeks ago, and this spring thing doesn't carry over, I'm going to be talking about him just as much, right? But in reality, if I'm a general manager of this team, like if I'm Getz and I'm watching this team, so far, I agree with 90% of what he's done, maybe 95% of it. Okay. I'm not a big fan of what they're doing with Vaughn, but maybe internally they feel like, hey, we got to give him one more chance. Great. You get to the midway point of the season. Vaughn's bad. Vargas is good. Vargas should be standing at first. Vaughn shouldn't even be on the team, right? You get to the middle of the season and Vargas can't hit his way out of a paper bag. And you've got somebody like Lenin Sosa you're moving around the field who's hitting the ton of the ball. Guess who the third baseman of the future is? Like, that's all I want this year. I say give everybody as much of a chance as you possibly can, but then also be fair across the board in your assessment. Do not worry about draft status. Do not worry about scouts believing in potential. They're wrong a lot. Watch what happens on the field, reward good play, and get rid of bad players. If that's what 2025 is about, and I see that kind of work from the general manager and from the front office, where it's heartless, as I've always said it should be, and we're not worried if somebody bought a new house or they're having a family or, we just really like this guy because he's just so much fun in the clubhouse. If it's the best players play and the bad guys get released, dumped down to the minors, whatever, it's a successful 2025. If we're midway through 2025 and I'm on this show yelling about somebody who's getting every opportunity and has done absolutely nothing with it, that's a problem.
Yeah. And, well, honestly, as we're looking at that, it makes me wonder what Larry Garcia's up to, because I feel like we need a lightning rod that can draw attention away from some of these young guys.
Dude, I have my lightning rods. My lightning rods. I'm watching Miguel Vargas.
I know
this year.
Miguel Vargas and Andrew Vaughn.
Right, and Andrew Vaughn and Miguel Vargas are the two lightning rods that I'm watching. Okay, because trust me, even though I like
Andrew Vaughn is the new Larry, isn't he? He's the guy that got the big contract.
No, nobody's Larry. Larry was the most ridiculous contract ever. It was the stupidest move ever. The guy hits a home run in a playoff game, and he makes millions upon millions of dollars for being nothing. I mean, he was really not that good of a player.
How does that not describe Andrew Vaughn?
Andrew Vaughn hasn't hit a home run in a playoff game.
Oh, that's right. Andrew Vaughn hasn't made the playoffs. That's
Andrew,
the big difference.
Andrew Vaughn is better wins above replacement than Larry Garcia. I don't even have to look it up, but I believe he's got to be. He's got to be. Okay. Andrew Vaughn's had an OPS over 700 in his life. You know, I mean, like there's got to, Larry, oh my goodness, when they would put him in the outfield, and he would play shallow, and Steve Stone would be like, he's a little far in. Like, he's trying to point out, like, you're not good enough to do that, Larry. And then it goes over his head, and then people would be like, remember the arguments we would get on this show? He plays 7 positions poorly. He plays them all poorly. You can put anybody in any position. There's no rule that says that I can't make Brandon Drury the shortstop. He's just not going to be very good at it. There's no rule that says that I want Kyle Teel's bat, so I'm going to make him the right fielder, but it's going to be a guy who's not playing in the right position. Like the idea that like he could play everywhere was always the most ridiculous thing. But the point I'm trying to get to is Miguel Vargas is going to be a lightning rod for me because I will not believe in him until I start seeing him do what he's doing right now at the major league level on an everyday basis. And I think I'm justified to have doubts about him because he got a full half season with the Dodgers surrounded by a much better lineup. I would think that it is harder to be good at Major League Baseball when you are in a lineup of bad players. When you're in a lineup of good players, I would think you get better pitches thrown your way from pitchers who have just gone through a murderer's row and just want to get done with you in 3-4 pitches. I think players benefit from being on really good teams. He didn't do well in a big sample size on a really good team. He's doing well right now in spring training. Let's see what happens. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because it's spring. I'm the one who kept saying if you perform in spring, you should get a chance on this team, but he's going to be a lightning rod. Andrew Vaughn's going to be a lightning rod because he's had a huge sample size, has been nothing other than a replacement level player. Probably a wonderful guy you'd love to have a drink with, but that's what he is. And then on the flip side, I may have hope for Lenyn Sosa based upon how he hit at the back end of last season and how he hit for the majority of spring, although he's kind of sliding off right now, okay? But everybody goes through little things. But I would also be the first one to tell you if he's hitting 220 in May, get him off the team.
Right.
Like in my mind, what you watch this year as a White Sox fan, what you really want to see as a White Sox fan is excellence rewarded? Do guys that play well and are improving, do they get the playing time? And is that over players that may have a higher pedigree, scouting report, draft position, money attached to them? In a season like this, when your payroll's at the bottom of the league, it shouldn't matter what anybody makes, shouldn't matter how they were drafted, nothing. If they get a legitimate chance and they can't play, next man up, because if somebody takes their job, that guy gets to play. That's the only way you're going to find 9 players on the field, 5 pitchers in the rotation, and a bullpen you can rely on and a couple of role players. You're not going to get them all because every prospect's going to work out, and suddenly the free agent market is going to get cheaper, which it's never going to do. So this is the only way to build a team back up again. That's all I'm watching for this year.
Yeah, and you're right about mentioning the rotation, the bullpen. You're watching to see if guys will take the step forward. So, Jonathan Cannon right now, of the named starters, not having a very good spring. He's having some struggles. But, how does Sean Burke respond to being, the opening day starter? How does Davis Martin look in a full year in the rotation? You want to see when Drew Thorpe comes back, when his elbow feels better, what does he have? And if that means, for example, if Cannon continues to struggle and Drew Thorpe comes back and that's his spot, well then.
Right, because if Shane Smith makes the rotation, which is possible, that's their Rule 5 pickup, and he's really pushing for it, and he's their Rule 5 pickup. If he, with what does he have here? I love, I love whip, 0.75.
You do love whip.
Oh, I love the whip. I love it. Shane Smith could be the fifth starter. Now, let's say he gets out there and he gets a month or so in and he's pitching really well. Even if he's in there and Drew Thorpe would have been the guy if it wouldn't have been for injury. When Drew Thorpe comes back, the guy who's performing the least effective, who still needs to go work it out somewhere, should go down. Okay? Unless, of course, they're like, well, we don't want to send him down, so now we're going to get rid of Martin Perez no matter what because he's not part of the long-term future. See, he got money. He's a more established guy, but what if that comes along too? Like, to me, stature, experience, your draft status, the money that's being given to you, none of that stuff should matter. The numbers should matter. What you do on the field should matter this year. That's all that should matter to the 2025 White Sox.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found and always on soxinthebasement.com.